When I heard from a well-respected Silicon Valley founder that Pete Hegseth under Donald Trump had been the best thing for founders because it can help you get to market quicker, a shiver went down my spine. I'd only recently seen the news reports that on the first day of the American bombing of Iran, a school had been hit and hundreds of children had been killed. Initial reports had said that AI was to blame. Having recently watched the Sky News documentary on the bombing, I don't necessarily even think that technology is the real issue here. However, as I sat in a room full of founders in this defense space, knowing that the majority of these people are actually there to stop things like this from happening, I really had to think about my own stance when it comes to such a devastating event. Some might see this particular disaster as an edge case, as an accident. But I think when we talk about technology ethics, we have to look at these things. Not one single child should have to die in the name of unchecked power enabled by technology. Technology founders often get stuck because they can't get their technology out to market quick enough. No traction means no investment, which means potentially beneficial technologies never making it out to the humans who they could actually help. But when this founder was lauding the practices of the US Department of War, it just felt wrong to me. This wasn't about giving founders a leg up. This was about giving even more power to those who are not responsible with it. When I think about the founders, I think about all of those who have sleepless nights, who have bills to pay, people thinking about how they might impress their investors or their potential customers. But if the American government had been less laissez-faire about some of these procurement practices, might that have enabled it to have kept its data up to date? And therefore, the school would not have been mistaken for a desired target in Iran, and 120 children and 26 teachers would not have been killed. Initial reports said it was AI. Follow-up reports said it was human error, and new investigations are bringing more and more things to light. So let's talk about this a little bit more. We're living in a technocracy. Big technology players are making a small number of people very rich and powerful. And I can't help but feel scared about the timing of AI, our politically polarized society, climate change, and all of that coming together in this era of big tech and big men. But feeling scared and quite frankly a little bit out of control has actually led to me feeling more passionate. I didn't become a scientist because I wanted to be a despot. I didn't become a founder because I wanted to be a dictator. And I don't work with hundreds of other tech founders so we can destroy the fabric of communities. I did it because science and technology are not the enemy. They are actually deeply entwined with what it is to be human and how the human race has actually survived. I became a founder because a founder is somebody who decides to step up and sacrifice in order to bring societal benefit, taking visions and making them a reality. And I work with other founders now because that enables me to be part of a next generation of responsible, ethical, impactful leaders. For those of you who are new here, I'm Dr. Becky Sage, and I've worked at the intersection of technology and innovation across business, startups, government, NGOs, and universities for the past 20 plus years. And over here, we're talking a lot about how we build technology without destroying humanity. We're taking the headlines and seeing what's underneath it, or taking the zeitgeist and finding the threads of meaning for ourselves within it. We're looking at polarized viewpoints from different angles and trying to find the nuance. And I'm not doing this to be salacious or clickbaity. I'm doing it so that we can figure out where we need to hold power to account, and how we can be more active members in an innovation community by building more responsibly and speaking out about things. Just like you, I'm not here with all the answers. Instead, I want to take my experiences, some of my access and my insights in order to help us all progress together. Today's video essay is a little bit different from some of the other ones that I'll be doing coming up because it's kind of an introductory essay. If you're on this channel, you'll know that I have mostly focused on producing Is It Marmite, which is a show where we look at the nuance behind big tech businesses and seeing what we can learn from them. These essays are going to be more about digging into different aspects of what it means to be a responsible tech founder. I've recently taken up a position as a Royal Society entrepreneur in residence, and I've worked with some of the world's most respected startups, accelerators, and incubator programs. I've worked with hundreds of founders, and I have been a founder myself, spending 7 years trying to figure out how to pay people's salaries and build responsibly is something that I learned a lot of lessons from. And I really do believe that from those lessons, I know a little bit more about what good looks like. And one thing I find is that often we can feel small. We can feel like maybe we don't have something to add to this conversation because we're not these massive founders as big as Elon Musk. We're not sitting in the halls of Parliament, and we haven't published books on X, Y, or Z. I'm not an academic in tech or ethics. I don't sit on a regulatory body or as a compliance officer. I slip through the cracks, and I think so many of us feel like we're slipping through the cracks. And yet I believe that we can still bring things to this conversation, and we still have the tools required to make change. The media has made us believe that every single decision made by a tech founder is one of greed or of power, because stories make the news if companies are big, if the decisions made by founders have an impact on many people. Some technology companies have become so big now, some founders, that their influence has become as big as some governments. And then the personalities of those founders are caricatured by the media. So not only do they start to mirror back this version of themselves, but in addition, many people watching start to mirror some of these behaviors as well. It becomes normalized. And as an autistic former tech founder myself, I do understand that mirroring. It's very easy to get swept up. But that's why I'm also very passionate about ensuring that the future of our technology and the future of our world isn't just driven by a few individuals. It should be, power should always be distributed. Everyone should always be checked. And it's right that we find ways to hold people with disproportionate power to account. We definitely should be questioning their decisions. But conversations on tech ethics seem to have become more and more polarized. And unfortunately, they seem to be really political often as well. You know, caring about hate speech online becomes a lefty woke thing because free speech should be protected above all else. This is just an argument to, again, hold up power for certain people in certain places. Regulation is deemed to strangle innovation and limit personal freedoms, when actually it could be something that gives everyday people freedom back. Because I don't know about you, but I don't feel like we have much say in nuanced decision making. What I'm not seeing much of is nuanced discussion that recognizes the value of real innovation, that creates progress without causing more harm. And yet so many people in tech businesses feel the pressure to either ignore or completely overlook the potential impacts of their work. Their sole focus is on building the money and the power. And somewhere down the line, the correct ethical conversations are not happening. And I think in my own first-hand experience, both for myself and for many of the founders I've worked with, and just being within this ecosystem, and what I've observed is that founders are rewarded for ignoring those niggling ethical questions. Investors pat them on the back for growth, consumers keep coming back for the dopamine hits, and business clients really enjoy a nice polished sales approach that bigger investment affords. So no one is asking about the ethics until it is too late. The founders that do spend a lot of time thinking about it, trying to ensure their principles are flowing through everything that they do, often end up being the ones who overthink, who are trying to go for perfectionism and then they don't move forward at all. It's a really difficult tension to tackle. I know I personally was always trying to find a way to give the world, or let's just say, that entrepreneurial ecosystem and the customers what they wanted, while building something that felt principled. And that really was something that I think led me to burnout. But then I am a self-confessed overthinker. What worries me is that it's the underthinkers that are often breaking through. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we actually find that middle ground. And I do believe it is very possible. Ethics and business success are not mutually exclusive. Many of the people that I talk to about this struggle because what they're looking for is one right answer. And the reality is that this is the job of each individual founder. Of course, we could bring out frameworks, and I will discuss things like that on this channel, but ultimately, it is about being human as you develop your business. Governance plays a really big role in this, and how we build checks and balances into a business I think is really important, not just allowing that one figurehead to be the one making the decision. I suspect you wouldn't even have got this far if you didn't think, like me, that technical advancement is part of being human. In part, we as human beings have thrived because we created technology. Technology that helped benefit a wider community. If we go back millennia, early technology has influenced who we are as human beings. In Eleanor Drage's book, What If We Got AI Right?, she argues that actually humans and technology are well integrated already. That thinking of technology and humans as these two totally separate, conflicting things actually means that we lose some of the nuanced insight and conversation. And I believe from reading her book, she believes, and I do too, that technical progress isn't some right which should be defended at all costs. So how do we walk this line between the two things? I think being clear on your own principles is a really important place to start, and ensuring that those shared principles are there with the other people that you're working with. If you're going to do something that can ultimately be powerful or influential, hopefully for something good, then you need to make sure that you also have a grasp on your own relationship to power. That should help you put in the guardrails that should be there as you build. Consider scenarios, find edge cases, consider how you would approach them. Now, we've seen these things go wrong over and over again. For example, OpenAI did have a non-profit board that was overseeing what it was doing. The founder, allegedly, was lying to that board. The thing is, we can't talk about technology without talking about human leadership. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And then the third point, in terms of how we might think about approaching this in the simplest possible way, you don't just stop. Creating something ethical, having principles isn't a one and done kind of thing. You've got to continue to adapt. You've got to continue to observe and evolve and grow, which means you also have to have the humility to be able to take accountability and responsibility if things unfortunately do go wrong. And I'll bring in my Is It Marmite series, I've already got several case studies around this kind of thing and what my opinions are on specific examples. And I will continue to bring more to you on this channel. There's always been a stance that technology is neutral. In the age of AI, this stance is starting to be broken apart. Technology and humans are not completely separate, and I'd love to argue that not all humans are inherently good or bad. Humans have proven that their moral compass is not always pointing in the best direction, that people serve themselves over others. And if technology and humans are tightly integrated, that then means that the technology itself no longer is a neutral thing. What does remain true is that human implementation and human-computer interaction are incredibly important topics, especially when we live in a world of technical dominance. So who is responsible? Who is ensuring that ethics is embedded into tech and its implementation? As it pertains to society being at harm, we see governments starting to put certain legislation in. But some might argue, and let's take social media as an example, that we are 20 years too late, at least. Move fast and break things has been a mantra in Silicon Valley for a really long time. I talked about this in my Facebook deep dive. And I talked about why founders actually do need to think in that way around certain aspects of the business, but not all aspects of the business. When I hear that the Department of War is happy for technology to be iterated on the field, what that tells me is that their bounds of move fast and break things have moved into an arena where it's no longer appropriate. Yesterday I watched the Sky News documentary, Iran School Bombing, The Search for the Truth. And what I watched was absolutely heartbreaking. In fact, it was an incredibly difficult thing to watch. And funnily enough, even though early reports talked a lot about technology and AI, most of what was in this documentary was not an AI or a technology conversation at all. It was a conversation about parents who had lost their children. Children who were shown in videos behaving just like all children do, playful, cheeky. They went to school one day and didn't come home. Not just one child, 120 children. At the same time, it also showed Trump and Hegseth just waiting on an investigation, making excuses, talking about the devastation of war, at the same time waging a war, and being very open about the fact that they want to use all the technological tools at hand and get them out there as quickly as possible. And of course, that overall conversation about using technologies in defense is not a new one. It certainly goes back to, Oppenheimer is the clear example of the conflict around developing science and technology in order to use it in a defense application. One of the most revealing parts of this documentary was a whistleblower, Wes J. Bryant, who had been a senior targeting advisor at the Pentagon. And one of the things he said was that they knew that data was not up to date, and they knew that an awful lot of work would need to be done to get data up to date, because most people claim that the issue here was the fact that this school was on what used to be a military site in Iran. But when we say used to be, we're talking 10 years ago. Things have changed since then. Most people have said it's not clear whether AI was directly used here, but what he said was there is no way this many strikes could be done as quickly, or they wouldn't have been done as quickly in the past. It's pretty well known that AI targeting systems are part of the tooling that is now used. And even though a formal investigation hasn't come out, there was definitely outdated data. The real issue here being that people aren't slowing down, stopping, thinking, and validating the data. And that's where, for me, that moves fast and break things attitude, and the attitude of that founder who was lauding this approach, is incredibly unhelpful. We cannot allow AI to replace human accountability. And that accountability needs to go all the way to the top. There are people in this documentary who I really hope one day are put in prison for a very long time for war crimes. Earlier on, before all the investigations were done, people were saying that Claude AI was involved. In a Guardian article, it then said it wasn't AI, it was part of Project Maven, which is run by Palantir. And then later on, Amnesty did an investigation. In that investigation, the CEO of Anthropic, who obviously ran Claude, or created Claude, Dario Amodei, said that whether his company's Claude AI software was used in a strike, it was not a violation of its use case readiness because a human made the final call, not Claude. Hang on, what? It wasn't a violation of use case readiness. So the technology did what it was meant to do, and this still happened. Now, I absolutely understand here that the issue in this particular case is one of political leadership and not necessarily technology leadership. But I wonder, from a founder's perspective, where do we draw the lines? What's interesting is obviously Anthropic and the Pentagon have a history here. Anthropic very much position themselves as the more like ethical LLM, and yet here they still don't know if their technology was responsible for what happened in Minab. What I've heard many people say is, well, this isn't a question of like bad technology or technology built in a bad way. This is a question of bad politicians. And absolutely, I completely agree. However, these things have to be taken into account. One of the issues I have with this particular scenario is if we are using general AI tools in a defense scenario, then I don't believe that the use cases have been worked through well enough. The level of human oversight required here is massive. If the tools working fine can lead to these kind of disasters, then perhaps we have to question whether these are the right tools at all. An AI CEO can't shrug off responsibility in the name of the human making the final decision, because the whole business model relies on the fact that humans trust what the AI tells them. And of course, I know that validating is a necessary step, but tech being relied on to give information in a critical moment is not the right tech for this particular use case. Now, all of this is not to say that there aren't issues with kind of over-regulating technology as well. A founder I work with has created technology that can help spinal patients be rehabilitated in a way way beyond anything that currently exists. But for the people it might impact, they will have to wait decades. In fact, it may not be available in their lifetime purely because of the regulatory pathway, which is heavy and generally only available to big businesses with billions of dollars. Can we build pathways that lower the risk and allow us to bring the benefit? I recently had a conversation with a startup investor about the ethics of the technology that they invest in, and they highlighted something that I think is responsible for a lot of the gaps in ethics and technology, which is those slippery shoulders. We have blinkered founders and we have slippery-shouldered individuals who are passing the buck to everybody else. This investor said, I outsource my ethics to the compliance team. And when I looked at it, I'm like, okay, they're a very busy person, and what they're doing is they're looking at legal frameworks and ensuring that they stick to legal frameworks. In their head, that's enough. They haven't figured out what it means to do ethical due diligence, so it just sounds like a small word that comes with an awful lot of extra work. For them, morally good looks like giving return to their investors and ensuring that they stay in the good graces of the FCA. It's not that they don't care, it's just they don't really know how to tackle it, and it's not a core focus of their day-to-day job. When I was watching those videos of the parents and the kids and the reconstruction of the school, for me this was so much more than technology. It was so much bigger than that. And yet, technology seems to be part of every big conversation that we have now. I felt incredibly angry, but I wasn't really feeling that anger towards the technology or the technologists, not in that particular moment anyway. For me, the anger was with the politicians. What it did make me think, though, was let's flip this script a little bit. We talk a lot about the technologists being at the whim of the politicians. They need things from the politicians. They need the contracts. They need the legislation going in their favor. But technology has become so powerful. Technology founders have become so powerful. In many ways, that's really not a good thing. But when it comes to politicians using and procuring technology in ways that can be devastating, using their responsibility of leaders of countries in a way that causes destruction and devastation, then the technology founder actually does have some power. That thing that we don't like about them being monolithic could actually be helpful because you could use it to stand up to power. We become entrepreneurs because we want some kind of freedom. But what good is that freedom if you end up escaping the reach of your own moral compass? I really want to go back and watch Oppenheimer again and read the Oppenheimer letters, because obviously, like I said, that this is a key case study for an argument like this. And I hope that our tech founders that the current tech founders can start to stand within a moral compass that much more greatly represents that of a wider population, because it's going to take time to actually build systems and new founders with the mindsets that can be helpful in this space. In any case, having individuals with overwhelming power is not a useful thing. We need distributed power, and we need voices who feel willing to stand up against that power. In terms of founders and technology ecosystem, this isn't going to all change tomorrow, but we can start to make shifts over time. Building simple dynamic frameworks into everyday operations and lowering the risk of overlooked mistakes leading to devastating impact. And it's not about ignoring technology development altogether. In fact, I would argue that that's just another slippery shoulder phenomenon. If we just stand here and say don't build it, then we're doing our part. I think we need to go further than that. So let's walk the line together and find the place where technological progress and moral good meet. That's all I've got for today. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.